I clicked it.
Okay, well, never mind then.
Message me right now in the little private
No, it's
chat.
okay. It's okay. I'll just go with it.
Hello, everybody that's listening right now.
Hello.
Somebody was here and then they left.
Oh, well, it was great that they stopped by.
We didn't have a lot of warning about this, so I'm sure we're not going to have a ton of people listening on live stream, but hey, we don't need a lot
They'll
of
listen
people.
later.
All we need is each other.
That's right. I've missed you, Dylan.
It's been a while. We
How
need
are
to
you?
do another one of those games.
Yes, we do.
I found a couple of them that we want to
Like
try,
a
and I
couple
haven't been
different ones?
doing the box office game, box office gay dot
That one, .me.
me.
That one's hard.
So it's fun. It's really it's so
It
much
is
more fun
fun, but
than
it's
the
hard.
yeah, but it's like if you don't get one, you don't get one. It's okay. As opposed to the act turtle is just like grueling.
I like that one though.
I've been wrong before, so I get it. Let's see. Make sure you like and subscribe this stream. Here we go. Now we're official. All right.
Yeah.
Welcome to Better Talk Saul. I am Dylan Schuck.
I'm Karen Peterson.
In this podcast, we're going to be discussing the first season of the AMC original series Breaking Bad. You're listening to Better Talk Saul. In this podcast, we're not going to pretend that Breaking Bad doesn't exist, so tread lightly if you're concerned about that show spoilers. Should we just
not good since we're just going to talk about...
Should we not say spoilers for Breaking Bad? Is that how we should do this?
Let's see how far we can get talking about Breaking Bad without spoilers.
Well, I'm saying about future seasons. Like, what if somebody is watching Breaking Bad for the first time?
Mm-hmm.
And they're curious. I think we could avoid future season spoilers. We could.
That's how I expected us to be doing this.
Yeah.
So I wanted, because for me, like, I came into Breaking Bad in, like, I think when season 5 was just coming, then I finally was like, I had seen part of one episode one time because it was a show I'd wanted to watch, but because I didn't catch it right from the beginning, you know, you can't just jump in season 3.
And there's no rush. If you're already behind, there's no rush.
Right, exactly. I mean, this was when it was still on TV, but so it was like the 5th season was finally coming. And I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to watch this show. I've been meaning to catch up with it. Then it was all streaming on Netflix. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'll watch the first 4 seasons and then be able to watch season 5 with my friends, basically. So that's what I did. But because I watched 1 through 4 so quickly, and every time that I've rewatched it since, or like, I don't even think I've done a full rewatch of the show since that first time, but I'll catch episodes or I'll watch like a chunk of a season or whatever. I have such a hard time remembering when things happened.
Right. Everything kind of blends together.
Yeah, totally. And so doing it this way and just doing one season at a time, it's like just really focusing on season 1 this time. Right. I was just like, oh, there's so many things that haven't happened yet that I thought happened in the first season.
Well, there's also so many things that happened in the season that I didn't realize only happened in that first 7 episodes.
Right.
And
we'll
talk about that. But we have a better intro to say, so I'll say it.
Okay.
You're listening to Better Talk Saul. In this show, we're not pretending the Better Call Saul doesn't exist, so tread lightly if you're concerned about that show's spoilers.
There we go.
Except for the last couple episodes and all the gene sequences. So let's talk about you've already started segueing that, but let's talk about our segue into, not our segue, our introduction to Breaking Bad. I started watching Breaking Bad from the very beginning.
Look at you.
First episode. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Why don't you tell people where they can follow you on the internet, Karen Peterson? That's all
I was waiting for you to say more. I'm sorry.
That's the whole thing I wanted to say on the podcast. I'm so glad that you were able to do this too. Tell people if they can listen to more of your work. No, I had a friend a friend that was a couple, and they were like every time I go to their house, they were watching Malcolm in the Middle at one point. They were big stoners, and they were binge watching Malcolm in the Middle. And then I'd be like, what the fuck are you guys watching Malcolm in the Middle for? Like, Malcolm in the Middle had been off the air for like 7 years at the time. Maybe not that many. When did could you Google when Malcolm in the Middle ended? Because it was probably only like 2 years at the time, honestly. It probably wasn't that long. But still, it was like, I was like, I'd come over and they're binging Saved by the Bell. I'm like, you're literally going back and watching these like Full House. Like, why are you doing this? It's such a waste.
May 14th, 2006 was the final episode.
So I was right. It was 2 years, not 7.
Look at you.
Wow, I did not realize I was this is so close to Malcolm in the Middle because this came out in 2008.
Yeah.
So anyway, because their obsession, I'm so glad they were obsessed watching. Well, I don't want to say they're obsessed. They were just watching it. And they had said, hey, you should check the show out. And at the time, I'm sure you remember, the show Weeds was a big show. And they're like, it's like Weeds, except with meth.
Yeah.
And I was like, sign me up. No, but I was like, the show Weeds at the time was a mom was selling weed to get money for her kids. So I'm sure a lot of people in the first season were like, oh, it's the guy from Malcolm in the Middle. It's kind of a comedy, whatever. But in general, AMC had not done any shows at the time. So there was no respect for the channel whatsoever. AMC was like literally just showed old movies.
I mean, that was when did Walking Dead start? That was 2009, right?
2010, I believe. You can Google that too. Mad Men was around then too. So this was like their first big show. They might have had, this might not be their first original show, but it was their first one that anybody watched.
Yeah, definitely one of the first ones. So
yeah, at the time,
like the first. Well, and it wasn't even a big show when it first started. So,
but man,
you're correct. October 31st, 2010 was Walking Dead.
So that's a phrase I haven't heard from you very often. That's really incredible. I'm having endorphins pumping right now. But
Mad Men, July 19th, 2007.
Oh,
so Mad Men was their first show.
Wow. So I got a you're right, you're wrong sandwich.
Yes.
Now, if you guys, for those of you not watching on the stream, Karen is delighted right now that I was wrong about that. But also, by the way, we stream these on YouTube. We officially got enough YouTube subscribers to be able to get a domain. I went to go set it, and it said, we're doing maintenance, so you can't set a name right now. And I said, of course. So next week, we'll probably have the domain for our YouTube. But if you go look at our Twitter at BetterTalkSaul, or at the Watch and Talk, either of them, we've retweeted many times. When we go live, you can follow that and subscribe if you want to watch on the stream. There's so many people in the chat right now. I can't even keep track of all the comments, but we do appreciate when people join in. It makes it better. But anyway, so watch the first episode. I remember feeling like, the show's about meth, right? Like, I remember feeling really dirty at the time. And this is still at the beginning of the renaissance of television, right? Like, it was very early on. So, like, cable shows were just becoming big at the time. I had started with network shows that I really started getting into watching TV shows once, not streaming, but like DVD shows were on DVD for the first time. So Lost, it started with for me, then 24, and then, watched Weeds, Sopranos, and, The Office. And then it kind of started expanding from there. But, the TV renaissance was still going on. It seems like a new show to me, but it's still so funny that they're still on. Like, some people don't have cell phones. They're,
nobody has iPhones because those came out the year before this started. And in the community that they're in, nobody would be able to afford one.
There's a comment that he says, you should get a GPS, man. You should invest in that. And I'm like, ooh, those days.
Oh, yeah. I remember the Garmins and the TomToms, and people had them on their dashboard.
I remember getting into a friend's car, like in high school, to go to a party. Mm-hmm. And when you went to a party in high school, people had to give you directions to the party. So somebody was drunk and trying to explain to you how to get to a place, and you're like, you call back, they're not answering. You're like, dude, what the hell? And I remember when I had one friend that had a GPS in his car, and I'm like, I want to go with him. He just typed, give me the address. Give me the address. And that wasn't a thing at the time. We would never have addresses. Anyway, so.
Well, I grew up before there was even MapQuest, so.
Well, yeah. I lived before MapQuest too, but not when
I was I was in high school. We didn't even have the internet yet.
You guys hadn't even invented horses yet when you were in high school, right? That had not been invented yet?
Yes, we had horses. That's how we got to school.
Oh, so it was one of the first generation of horse domestication.
I had a first gen horse.
But anyway, I remember thinking when the pilot aired, it was the best pilot ever, one of the best pilots I've ever seen. I think Lost is one of the best pilots I've ever seen.
Lost is still my very favorite pilot of all time.
Yeah, it's just like one of those pilots that as soon as it's over, you're like, do you have the next episode? You know, the next episode. And the first 3 episodes of Breaking Bad are so incredibly good. I mean, the whole show is good, but it's just such a great attention grabber. I can't believe when I talk to somebody that says they couldn't get into Breaking Bad. I'm like, you could get into it right off the bat. How could you not get into it? It's so good right off the bat. And
I understand just on that. I understand people who just can't invest in it because of the subject matter. Like I have people who are really sensitive to stuff that's, the drug topic and things like that.
Of course.
And that I understand. But yeah, anybody who is like, oh, it just didn't hook me. Like, I don't understand those people.
Get your brain reworked.
Right.
Get brain surgery.
I remember several years ago, Netflix released a study. I think it was Netflix that did it. Because obviously they don't release a lot of their viewership numbers. But they were doing kind of a thing of these are the shows that are the most bingeable. And basically they did a thing. They were looking at how many episodes it took before someone didn't take a break between, just started really invested in binging. And for most shows, the average was 3 to 4 episodes. Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead were both episode 1. Those were the 2 shows that immediately hooked people right from the first episode that were streaming on Netflix at the time.
I don't know how everybody got through the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, because I wasn't really into Game. I don't know how I got through I still don't know. I think it's a miracle that I got through the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, and it's not that I think those are boring seasons.
Or a curse?
I don't think those seasons are boring, but it's that I didn't know what the fuck they were talking about ever. Mm-hmm. And then once season 3 happened and I started getting interested, all of a sudden I just started absorbing all the information. I knew who people were talking about, and then going back and rewatching it, I get it completely. But
for Game of Thrones,
it took me 3 seasons with Game of Thrones until the Red Wedding, until I was really into the show. And this was the first episode.
I had read the books. I'd read the first 3 books before I finally started watching the show.
Huge difference.
Yeah, huge. So.
Yeah, I was I had bought the season. So it was luckily one of the situations where I had bought the first season on Blu-ray. It was before HBO Go. So I was like, it's just kids will never understand nowadays buying a CD and forcing yourself to listen to it because you paid $17 for it. Yeah. So for me, I need to get through the first season. Obviously, the first season of Game of Thrones ends very surprising. So that gave me enough gas to get through to the end of the 3rd season, I think. So anyway, my point is Breaking Bad, I was hooked immediately. Mm-hmm. And it has been so cool to see it grow to one of the biggest shows ever, because nobody watching it at the time thought it was going to be a phenomenon the way it was. But we knew the entire time we were watching something so fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know that we were
for the first 3 seasons, it was the best show no one was watching. And I remember seeing the TV Guide covers and the articles on Entertainment Weekly and different websites that were specifically saying that. And they were really, you know, I mean, the Emmys were kind of paying attention, but there was so much of an effort in trying to get people to tune into this show, because it wasn't just like, oh, hey, this is a great show, you're missing out. It was like, no, you don't understand what you're missing. This is a phenomenon.
Yeah, I feel like I have to give friends that haven't seen it electroshock therapy to get it, because I always say my favorite show of all time is 24.
Really? But I didn't know.
Such a jerk. But the best show of all time, in my opinion, is Breaking Bad. For sure. Hands down. It doesn't have a bad episode. Like, people are like, oh, the Fly episode. We'll talk about that.
Oh, I love, yeah. I think that's actually one of my favorites.
It's not one of my favorite episodes, but I think it's an important episode. I don't think it's a bad episode. I don't think it's a wasted episode. Do not think it's anything to complain about. Oh, great comment in the chat. We have a fire emoji. Appreciate that. There we go. We got more in there. So anyway, one thing. So obviously, first we have to talk about the opener. This man looking as dorky as a human can. Yes. In his whitey tighties, his shirt tucked into it. Like, part of his shirt tucked into it.
Right.
Looking so, purposely embarrassing. With a gun, looking like he's about to have a shootout with the police. I remember by the end of that episode being like, having no idea that that's how the first episode would wrap up. You think that's later in the show. That's what I thought. I didn't think that was the ending of the first episode that we saw. It was like, you don't know the format of the show, so you don't realize oftentimes they show you the end of the episode at the beginning, which a lot of shows will do sometimes. Movies will do that. A lot of stories will do that. Kind of get you hooked. And
then it's that whole, I bet you're wondering how I ended up here.
Yeah. Hey, it's me, the dad from Malcolm in the Middle. Bet you're wondering how I ended up in my whitey tighties with part of it tucked in, coming outside of a camper, cooking meth.
It's such a great intro, because it tells you so much without revealing anything. So it's like it doesn't. Exactly. But it's they basically, without telling you how he ends up in this situation, you're gonna find out. But what you learn right from the beginning is that Walter is really awkward and dorky. And that you learn that Bryan Cranston is really committed to this role. And also, yeah, I mean, the fact that that's the first thing you see of him in the entire show, that's a little bit brave. And but I think it really sets you up for, this is a show that you cannot guess where it's going to go, and it's going to take you in some really crazy directions, and that's exactly what it delivers on.
I think actors by nature are vain people, right? Like, kind of by nature, right? Like, a lot of people are uncomfortable around cameras, right? Where you have to be as comfortable as you possibly can in front of a camera, superhumanly comfortable around a camera. And to show that he's secure enough in himself to appear this way right off the bat and let it be a part of the promotional imagery for it, shows you a lot of his security as an actor, as an artist, that he was willing to subject himself and lose he had such a lamented position as a sex appeal in this world, and it was all gone in that moment. Like, everybody was like, ooh, Bryan Cranston, dad from Malcolm in the Middle. DILF, total DILF.
So, such a DILF.
Yeah. But that's a really good point too, about how committed he is to it. And how did he get into this peculiar situation? Because in the end, it's a fire truck. It's not police. And at the time, you think that he's about to have a shootout with the police. He thinks he's about to have a shootout with the police.
Yeah, he totally thinks the cops are on their way. And he's in the middle of committing several felonies. And he sees only one way out. And yeah,
he
but
shot the cops.
No, I think he would have shot himself.
Yeah, but he was pointing at them.
He was.
Maybe death by cop. Was he trying death by cop?
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah,
could be.
I do think we've seen this kind of thing before. Somebody finds out something detrimental and they don't react, and they're like, "You got mustard on your shirt, right?" And you also like think they don't understand it, but then he's like, "Do you understand what I said?" And he's like, "Yeah, like lung cancer, it's terminal." And that's how we find out about it, because we don't hear the doctor saying, because he's kind of zoned out. And that while he's zoned out and in some type of trance, he still completely understood what was said to him. It was also surprising to me how much the gray matter stuff was set up in this first season, because at the beginning of the show, you're like, this is a teacher. He's a science teacher. He's a nerd. He's, he works at a car wash.
Because he can't afford to survive on just his teacher salary.
Right. And there's a lot of stuff about the budget. They're like, did you order $14.99 at Staples last month? Remember the American Express, the card we don't use? He's like, oh, I'm sorry. That's just like, fucking, this is miserable hearing this. But, I still don't get the complete point by the end of this, that he's not just like really good at chemistry. He's an actual literal genius, like Nobel Prize level of a genius. And in the first season, they're setting that up. I think the writers know that, but they don't want to just spell it out for you that he's a genius. They let it be known, like, look, he makes this meth that's crazy good. But as far as we know, any science teacher could make meth that good, but they just don't.
Right, but there are some hints. Like we see that scene of him and Gretchen going over like the chemical composition of the human body, and they can't account for this other piece, and Gretchen suggests it's the soul. Like they have that moment. And then you do see, like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but you see like a Nobel Prize plaque in one of the episodes, and like the what I understood from that was like someone won a Nobel Prize partly because of Walt's work.
Right.
He didn't win it, but someone, because of him, was able to. And so I think you, throughout this first season, you do get those glimpses, you get those hints and bits of understanding that this is a guy who ended up a chemistry teacher in a high school. Like even the party when he and Skylar go to Elliot and Gretchen's house for that party, and he makes the like, oh yeah, Walt used to work with us at Gray Matter, and then he's like, yeah, but I ended up in education, and someone asks him, oh, what university? Like the assumption is he's at a research university still doing great work, but in education instead of a corporate world. So you get those hints throughout the whole first season, which I think really help us understand and really set up that this is something in Walt's background that matters. And it ultimately, of course, we know that that's what fuels him, but I think that they do a really good job of laying that foundation throughout.
I think the writers definitely knew, but they didn't want to just exposition dump this guy's a worldwide genius. They wanted to slowly let us understand through the characters' actions and the characters around them's actions. And I think, like you said, they do a great job of setting that up. But I don't think I realized when I watched the show originally until like 2 or 3 seasons in, that I was like, oh, this isn't just I know how to do chemistry. Like I know how to use the right beaker. Because when I'm first watching it, I'm like, oh, Jesse can't make good meth because he just doesn't even know how to use a boiling flask versus a measuring flask or a volumetric flask. And as you go through it, you're like, oh, it's not just because he knows basic chemistry. He's literally one of the top brains in the world at chemistry. And anybody of that level doesn't cook meth for the most part. Especially when Gail comes into the picture. That's when you really, well, that's not spoiling, because if you don't know what I'm talking about, you don't know what I'm talking about. That's when you really, really understand who he is and what he is to the world. What were you about to say?
Yeah. Sorry. Well, and I am not disagreeing with you at all, because I think you're absolutely right that we don't fully understand. I would never. We don't fully understand Walt's genius, but I do think that we get additional glimpses of it, like when Jesse and Walt are not but I mean, when Jesse and Walt are not working together, Walt's walked away, and Jesse is with Badger, and he's trying to duplicate it. And they have that scene where Badger picks up one of the flasks or something, and Jesse starts going through exactly what you just did and starts explaining what each of the flasks are. And it's like, oh, and then he's like, it's just chemistry. And it's like, oh, he's been learning from Walt. Like, he actually learned. And
he's empowered by it.
Yeah, he totally is. But I think that even though he's been learning this from Walt, and he clearly has really learned a lot of this chemistry, he still cannot replicate Walt's work. He still can't get that clear glass that Walt has been able to manufacture. So even that right there tells you that it's more than just Walt's really good.
Completely
like, there's
agree.
something even extra special about him.
And it's clear the writers had a plan for who they were dealing with, and they wanted to, peel those layers off in a natural way, and I commend them for it.
Yeah.
It just would have been not as exciting, I think, if they were like flashbacks. You are the smartest person in the world. You got a medal from, President Reagan for being the smartest person. There you go, the smartest person award. I don't know how they could have done that. But I
it also wouldn't have worked as well if he was just going around whining about, like, well, I'm so smart and I'm stuck in this school.
Right.
He's
like,
right. And when we're first getting to know him, he's accepted that this is his life. This is what he ultimately chose, or had chosen for him, however he wants to look at it, however we want to describe it. But he's accepted that this is his life. And that's part of it too, is like, I mean, you start to see more and more of his dissatisfaction with how things are going and with all the things that he doesn't have and can't do. But he's not whining and complaining, at least in these first 7 episodes. He's not spending his time focusing on all the ways that the world did him wrong, and all the ways that he was screwed over by this person or that person, or the things that he should have. It definitely motivates him, but it's not something he spends a lot of time talking about.
Also, just his pride is so toxic. And where he won't, like, he doesn't want to take money from Hank, because he looks at Hank is being beneath him intellectually. I do love to see the Hank and him dynamic as the show goes on, where Hank underestimates him, obviously, completely, always. And he thinks his big dick macho shit, it means anything in Walt's world.
Right.
And, Walt doesn't feel the need to prove himself, because it's like, it's like, I don't feel the need to prove my masculinity to my dog. And that's what it seems like it is, even though hey, Mamba, I got muscle.
She's like,
don't mess with me. I
don't know. Let's talk about that stash, Dad.
Yeah, that's what she literally just seemed to say. She was like, I know how masculine you are. You got mustache for days. So anyway, I flex my mustache.
It is a very nice mustache, I will say.
That's the nicest thing Karen's ever said to me.
Aw.
But yeah,
I was admiring it.
It's okay. It's getting weird. Yeah, it's such a great setup for something, because in the first episode, especially, Hank is just so unlikable. He's like, hey, this is a gun. It's for men. You got to have balls to use it.
I was like, someone please punch him.
Right.
Please.
Yeah, he's racist. He's insecure. right? Like he has to have. I was thinking about seeing him and Gomez interacting, and I was thinking how much they're partners, right?
Yeah.
So neither of them's above the other until Hank becomes ASAC, I believe. But it's Steve just like at one point, and every time they start talking shit back and forth, there's a point where Steve just stops, right? Where he's just like, all right, man. Because it's just they go back and forth, go back and forth, go back and forth, and then he takes it to the next level, takes it to the next level, takes it to the next level. And what up? And at one point, Steve's just like, all right, and it's just funny to see that he has worked with him long enough to know, he always has to have the last word, and I think that's and a perfect actor to play this role because we see him as a serious character and we see him as a silly character early on, and I think in a way it makes us as an audience also underestimate him because eventually, obviously he underestimates Walt completely. Eventually, Walt underestimates him as well.
Yeah, and by extension, we the audience also do because we just, especially in the first episode, but I would even say throughout the first season, we as an audience just want to write him off. And maybe, I mean, I don't know what it was like in 2008 when people were watching this for the first time. You could kind of help us out with that, but
you don't remember 2008?
I mean, I do, but I didn't watch the show. But I mean, like, we didn't have, like, the population as a whole didn't have the same attitudes toward law enforcement as we do now, and didn't have them under as much of a magnifying glass, maybe.
Well, not everybody had cameras that could pick them up.
Right. Like things are totally different now in regards to how we look at law enforcement, which is a good thing. They need to be under a lot more scrutiny, especially than they were back then. But I think that watching it now, all these years later, just it does feel like so long ago. But I think
it doesn't sound far long ago, 2008, but it feels long ago. Like, but it doesn't sound long ago.
Like kids born in 2008 are in high school now, so there's that.
And they're all hooked on meth because of the show. Thanks a lot, Obama.
Exactly. Anyway, but I think that we watching it now, we see Hank especially, and just go like, man, this guy sucks. And we do not want to have any positive feelings toward him at all. Like he's just awful, and it makes us root for Walt, especially when you have a scene in I can't remember if it was episode 6 or 7 when Hank actually comes to the high school and they're in the like workroom, the supply room. And it's like, dude, Hank, you're such an idiot. All the clues are right here and you are just choosing to ignore it. But we're rooting for Walt at that point.
He just thinks so little of Walt because Walt isn't flashy like him.
Walt
doesn't need to prove, like, it's not that he doesn't need to, because obviously Walt has a lot of insecurities too, but he doesn't feel like I said, he just also thinks nothing of Hank.
Right.
And they have a friendship together, but a friendship by situation, a situational friendship.
Oh yeah, these two would never have anything to do with each other if their wives weren't sisters.
Right.
But also I think Walt, I mean, we have to remember too, he's very new to the drug trade. And so he hasn't really gotten himself too steeped in that world at all. And then also, not only is he not flashy like Hank, but he just doesn't fit any of the standard profile or stereotypes that Hank is used to encountering. Like when he takes Walt on the ride along and he's pointing out like, oh yeah, let's look at her teeth and let's look at, you can see this person does that and you can watch this, and Walt doesn't fit any of those things that Hank is used to looking for at all.
Yeah, Shogunzilla in the chat says, I like that Hank became more of a fleshed out character. It's kind of shocking how dumb and arrogant he is at the beginning, especially when you rewatch. You I think after the pilot, they started fleshing him out better. Because there's the scene where he goes to pick up Walt Jr. When
the drug talk.
Yeah, and have the drug talk with him. And, you get to see a lighter side to him as it goes along, while it also shows him using his arrogance around certain people. When he's around a bunch of people, especially other people he finds to be macho men, he plays it up a lot more. When he's around, Walt by himself and Marie and other family members or other like that, he doesn't find it as important to try to prove himself as much. And I think that's a purposeful thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Look at this. I'm all full of compliments on you tonight. But I know.
Something's in the water.
It is. But I think that's a really good point. I also think for myself, the episode where I started to think, okay, Hank doesn't totally suck, is the intervention. When he kind of is like, yeah, you need to do this, man. And then Marie says her piece of like, hey, I actually think Walt should do whatever he wants. And then Hank is like, you know what? Actually, I agree with Marie.
And do you get the impression that he didn't want to get in trouble with his wife?
No, I could see that, but I don't feel like that's really what it was. I think it was that he was listening to her and he's just like, you know what? Yeah, I've been so caught up in Skylar's side of the story. I haven't actually stepped back to think about it. So it shows that he has the ability to listen to the people around him and to kind of step back and look at a situation as a whole and not just like the immediate what is in front of you, which is something that someone in law enforcement, especially in his line of law enforcement, needs to be able to do. His sometimes inability to do that is why he totally missed the signs on Walt, but for so many years. But
so to segue into another topic, tight.
Yes.
So I think if we want to also look at this as an opportunity to speak about the show from the lens of Better Call Saul having just ended, the only real way to do that for the first season is Tuco. Yeah. Obviously, there's a little bit more to it, but next season we're going to have a lot more people introduced. We're going to have Saul introduced. We're going to have I guess that's spoilers for other ones. But I guess I don't want to give but we're going to have multiple characters introduced next season. And we're going to be able to talk about it under that lens a little bit more. But it reminds me to think back to the way Tuco was in Better Call Saul, having kind of forgotten about the early interactions with Tuco. And he had just gotten out of jail, and that was because of Mike and Nacho. And, he's obviously beating the guy to death is the last thing that we see. And even though we don't know at the time he's beaten to death.
Right.
So spoiler alert for next season. Sorry. I said I'm not going to do that kind of stuff. But it is interesting that, there's a couple things I want to say, by the way, before I actually get to that. There's a couple of those like butterfly effect moments where
Hi, Shakita.
Where he if that conversation with Elliot had perhaps had a little more tact to it. Yeah. But it seems like Elliot has no idea that he still holds a grudge toward anything. Right?
I don't think anybody knows that. I don't even know if Walt really knows the extent to that grudge.
Right. And if he had, and by the way, I don't want to be mean, but man, that guy's ears are they're satellites. And anyway, that guy, huge ears. Anyway, if that
he's making a lot of money from his acting career. So.
He had slight bit more tact in that conversation, show would have been over, nothing would have happened, and it would have been over. It would have been pretty boring. So I'm glad he didn't have that. But you think about moments like that, man, if this went a little bit different, If he had done that, he never would have needed to go back to meth to get the but maybe he would have, because he enjoyed the situation. So maybe that's not true.
The thing is that I mean, I don't think that any amount of tact would have changed the situation, because when they have that conversation, Walt is just his what he's really mad at is not that Elliot's talking to him. It's that Skylar told him in the first place.
Well, I'm saying if he had played dumb a little better and just offered him a job, which he was doing,
True.
you know, but then his pride again is so toxic that it prevents him from doing that. Anyway, obviously everything that happens with Tuco, it's really funny to think how it extends from here, that they happen to well, we'll talk about it in season 2.
Yeah, stop spoiling stuff.
Because a lot of coincidences when you think about it, how we interact with another group of criminals that happen to know these criminals, but he meets both of them completely separately. But we'll talk about that.
Yes, but the thing is that I think what we are learning is how connected people are. So like, we first meet Tuco because Jesse needs to have someone arrange an introduction, because Tuco is the new Emilio. They need a distributor, and Emilio is unavailable. And so who introduces Jesse to Tuco? It's Skinny Pete. And how does Skinny Pete know Tuco? They were in prison together for like a year. So they were cellmates. And so it's like, you know, a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. And so I think that even though there are certain connections that kind of seem like they're coincidental, really that whole world is all connected somehow. Everyone's
Also,
connected to everybody.
They're trying to make Albuquerque look like a small place, even though it's still a metropolitan city.
But it is a metropolitan city, but it's not like LA or San Diego. Right. It is still kind of a small town.
But secondly, also the meth trade in there, you know, the people that hold the territory hold it strong.
Yeah.
I also did not remember that Crazy 8 was a rat that ratted his own cousin out. I did not remember that.
I know, crazy. By the way, Albuquerque has a population of 560,000 people.
That's small. Wouldn't even call it a metropolitan city.
And then when you consider then you're dealing with the drug trade in Albuquerque with a population of 560,000 people, and that's as of 2020, so it was even less in 2008. But I'm saying
meth trade.
Okay, yeah. And so when you keep winnowing it down to that, words are hard. It just, the world becomes even smaller. So the chances of people having connections to everybody else in those kinds of circumstances, it's very likely. So I don't think I don't think any of these connections are coincidences at all.
Now, I know you people listening on audio only can't see, but Karen and I decided to do something special for this podcast. But we decided that to get in the spirit of Breaking Bad, we would try meth on the podcast as we go along. So we have been just smoking fat bags of meth. It's not blue this entire time. How does it feel? Is it the first time you ever tried meth?
Yeah.
Definitely not my
first time I'll admit to.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. But it's, you know, it's quite pleasant. It's quite relaxing. So we want to shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, methamphetamines. Shout out to methamphetamines. With any dealer on the street, use promo code BetterTalkSaul and you'll get 20% off your first bag of meth. Meth, it's the best. Meth. Anyway, so I definitely want to give a shout out to that. I found also a surprise in rewatching the balls that Walt had right off the bat. Like, he's a type of person, like, I'm like sitting there and like there's like a mess on my floor that I see. Like, I don't know, like there's somebody came and did pressure washing and it went under my weather stripping on my door, and I have hardwood floors. Just a little bit of just wet from outside. And it took me like a day to clean it up, because I passed by it like 6 times and was like, I don't want to do that right now. It would take me seconds, but I still didn't. So all I think is when I see this show, there's a point to this. When I see the show, I'm like, man, I couldn't imagine having to clean up an acid, but like a body that's like, and that's so gory. That's so gory. I think we're
used to. You're so all over the place in this episode. I keep going like, what are you about to talk about?
Shout outs to Meth. But anyway, it's just like it's so much. All these things that he's willing to do that take an entire day cleaning up a dead body, or all the arduous tasks that they're willing to do. I'm just as a generally lazy person, it's interesting watching somebody like this. It's inspiring. Walter White inspires me, and so does Meth.
That's wonderful. I do want to talk about the death scenes that we see in the first 3 episodes, like what's happening there. I guess it really comes to a head in episode 3. But we, over the years, I don't know if you and I have had this conversation, but I've talked with a lot of people. The conversation always comes back to what was the point of no return for Walt? Where was it that he really became this guy who was never going to turn around? Actually, not that long ago.
Break bad?
Yeah, exactly. And not that long ago, someone was trying to tell me it was this situation, and no, because when he is like, he and Jesse have like flipped a coin, and Jesse has to destroy the body, and Walt has to kill Emilio, right? Crazy, yeah. Anyway,
he was kill Crazy 8. Emilio was killed at the beginning.
Emilio is dead. He has to kill Crazy 8. Okay, I kept getting those two mixed up. Anyway, when like you can still see the humanity in Walt when he has to kill this guy that he doesn't know. And he's
a pros
trying
and cons list.
Yeah. And what's on the pros and cons list? Things like on the con side, it's things like it's Judeo-Christian principles and killing is wrong and all this stuff. And it's like, he's trying everything he can to convince himself like not to kill this guy. And
pro was he will murder you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of underlined it.
And that's the only thing on his list. Yeah.
Bottom line. Yeah, bottom line.
Yeah. But even then, even after that, when he knows this is what's going to happen, he still is looking for reasons not to do it. And when he ultimately does it, it's not because he's made the choice because like, well, I guess I just have to get this done. It's because he's about to let the guy go and realizes, Walt had passed out. The plate broke when he was bringing the guy some food. And he realizes there's a piece of the plate missing. This dude's about to kill him on the way out the door. And that is when he's just like, he kind of is in a situation. He has to do it. He doesn't have a choice. And so even then, like right up till the end, the only reason Walt kills him is because he has to. It's literally life or death for Walt right in that moment. So like, he's not like, he's still, it was so intense. And there was so every time I've watched it, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm always like, what's going to happen this time? Like maybe this time it's going to turn out differently. And
right, because it really puts you in the shoes. Like some shows will have someone like Jack Bauer kill somebody and just move along to the next episode. Yeah. This shows him agonizing over it.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel that same devastation when we see that he has taken a broken piece of plate and he planned to kill him with it.
Yeah.
And I just think that I commend the show for spending the time to take care with a life of a character.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to show something also real quick. Show this real quick.
Don't let shopping strain your brain, oh. Just sing this short refrain, oh.
Our furniture is bueno.
Tampico is the name, oh.
I like also that he that Crazy 8 when he said our furniture is bueno. He puts his arm up in the air a little bit. Mm-hmm. That was something a little subtle, but it showed that he had done that his whole life. Yeah. Right? Oh, this is not the right angle. There we go.
That's better.
Because then it takes away the fact that I have this fake green screen behind me. But it shows like, I feel like the actor actually put some thought into, okay, if this was a song that I'd been singing since I was a kid because it's my parents' shop, I would have this little like silliness to it. Like, my furniture is bueno. And he puts his arm up in the air. I don't know. That sounds silly, but anyway.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, again, I just think it's
I keep doing that this episode. We need to stop that.
I think other than Combo and Skinny Pete and Badger, the acting on the show is almost always top notch. I find I've always found Skinny Pete, Badger, and Combo to be corny, but they work out in the end, and eventually once you get used to them, you don't mind it as much. But it really does seem like adults writing children's lines, even though they're not children; they're just immature. You're making faces like you disagree with me, but
no, I'm listening to you. I'm like, okay,
yeah. Well, you made.
I mean, I do disagree. I do disagree, but I'm also like, okay. I respect.
It's just one of those times where it feels like the writers are writing how they think.
How do you fellow kids?
And then the actors then trying to do their best with them. So I don't think it's necessarily their fault. It's just kind of hard to write people talking like that on TV without it coming off as corny. Because I don't think Jesse ever comes off as corny, though.
No, and that's why I kind of think that Badger and Skinny Pete and Combo come out exactly the way they want them to, because obviously they can write good lines for someone that is that age, because
probably acting.
It's probably acting. Yeah, they're not.
I think there's levels and scenes, but in general, I pretty much never ever fully believe Combo for sure. Mm-hmm. I definitely think Skinny Pete, especially by El Camino, he's got it. He's finally got it down. And Badger takes a little bit too, but Combo,
well, luckily
he doesn't fit my combo. That's for damn sure. Anyway,
I like them. They're cute. They're cute boys. I want them to clean themselves up. I don't mean cute like, oh, they're hot. I don't mean that.
I mean like over them.
No. I just mean like, oh, I want you guys to clean yourselves up and get real jobs and stop being losers.
I think that I agree. I want them, and I know they never will. Anyway, anything else we want to talk about in this end of this first season? I was surprised a couple plot lines were fleshed out in this. The what's it called? The klepto? Somebody addicted to stealing.
Kleptomania. Oh yeah, with Marie.
Kleptomania with Marie. Gray matter stuff. I did not realize in the first season how much they had the gray matter stuff mapped out. And I also had kind of slept on the plot line of Jesse attempting to get a job and live this great life. And I also don't understand how anybody in an open house would ever start banging on a locked door. And then when somebody behind it said no, still attempt to come through it. Doesn't make sense, but hey, even the perfect shows are perfect. Even though they have shit like that.
Yeah. Something else that I guess I hadn't really caught on to before was how long it takes for Walt to finally tell Skylar that he has cancer. I knew it wasn't in the first episode or two. Oh, really? Because I mean, it's like it's like the end of episode 3 or 4. I can't remember now.
No, it's the end of episode 3. Yeah, when he comes back.
Yeah, it's the end of episode 3, and the way that he tells her and the reason that he tells her, it's just like, I don't know. It to me that felt a little bit of like seeing a glimpse of Walt's selfishness, because like he's been holding on to this really vital piece of information that's going to change her life too. And he saves it for like this moment when it benefits him most to tell her. So just the way that the timing on it was interesting.
We see the evolution, I have to say, of his lying. In the first season, he's like, oh gosh, can you believe it? Oh gosh, gee willikers. I left my phone in the car, and then I went into the car wash and forgot, and it soaked my phone. And can you believe that the payphones were all broken down? And by the time it gets to later seasons, when he lies to Jesse about something big, how much the evolution of his lying has come, because he lies several times, and he does this like voice when he's lying that's just almost makes me cringe, because he's so corny about it. And that's one thing I was thinking. I was like, oh man, he becomes such a better liar as it goes along.
It's interesting too, because there are times where Skylar does believe him, and then there are times where she chooses to because she wants to, and she doesn't want to accept that she knows he's not telling the truth. And there are different ways that she reacts, and you always know when she really believes him versus when she just is like, okay, I'm gonna just let this happen.
I love when he thinks he can pull the wool over her eyes, and she's just like, oh, I called the car wash and found out you're not lying. And then us as viewers are like, oh shit, the fucking jig is up.
But yeah, okay, so something else too, because I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions about Skylar, and I always really liked her. But it's interesting because, again, since I binge watched the first 4 seasons so quickly, I saw like my understanding of Skylar as a character is much more based on who she is by the end of season 4 and into season 5 than it is Skylar season 1. And so watching these early episodes and seeing things like when she's like, when Walt claims that Jesse's his marijuana dealer. And so she goes and shows up at Jesse's house and says, stop selling my husband pot. That's such a stupid thing. And it's so those kinds of things. And then when she arranges the intervention to convince Walt to do treatment for his cancer and going behind his back to talk to Elliot.
She's a force to be reckoned with.
She totally is. Yes. But the way that she's introduced, it was like watching it this way and just really focusing on season 1. Now I'm like, okay, I understand why people kind of were like, ew, Skylar sucks, not because I disagree with the things that she does, but because the way that it's presented and the way that it's done does make her look like a really controlling person. And you can kind of see why Walt feels trapped in his life, and it's because Skylar really does make so many of his decisions for him, and he really doesn't have a lot of say in his life. And I think that
it's fault just as much as it is hers.
Well, yes, I agree with you, but I think that it's credit to the writers that they flesh out her character more in going into season 2 and really not soften her. That's not the right word. But really do more to show Walt's complicity in their relationship and how they both do some of these things, and that a lot of the decisions that she had to make, like going to Jesse, there's a reason for that. But I think just looking at who she is in season 1, it's like, yeah, I don't like where this character is going.
But by the time people were complaining about that, it was like season 4. So I in general, and I'll add some caveats to this after I say it, but I've basically never seen a conversation around Skylar that was negative not be shrouded in toxicity. I know there's a lot of double negatives in there that probably made that confusing, but most of the negativity I've seen thrown towards Skylar on the internet had been shrouded in toxicity.
There's definitely a lot of that. I'm not saying there's not. I'm just saying that, even just with friends that I've talked to.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
I want to specify before it gets lost in the conversation. I'm not saying anybody out there that complains about Skylar or has any issues with her as a character, her motivations, or anything she's done means that they're toxic and their argument's toxic. I just mean the conversations as they've grown like a snowball on the internet. Those in general, to me, have almost exclusively been toxic conversations.
And there's definitely a lot of that. I agree with you. But like so much of what I've seen has been also like part of that, but also just really taking issue with the way that she's written and the choices that she makes.
So the way she's portrayed.
Yeah. Which I think that looking at the way she is introduced in season 1, I can see where people who started from that season and then had a break between season 1 and 2 really did form this opinion of Skylar that wasn't a great one, that maybe they didn't ever kind of get to a point where they could move past that idea of her. So then everything she does in subsequent seasons is still, they're still seeing it through how they saw her in season 1.
I just don't see anything from her as a character, from her performance to her motivations to the things that she does, that I would think would make any sense for somebody to make it so prevalent in their mind, other than them having issues with the way women are, like, I'm talking about the toxic fanboy shit, where it becomes so toxic in your brain that this is no longer about Skylar. This is really about your issues with women in film and TV. And I see that from a ton of shows. People complaining about the wife of it. And I don't mean if somebody thinks that they're not written, strong enough or whatever, that's another conversation. I'm just talking about basically groups of men who sit there jerking each other off on Reddit, telling them how much a woman sucks in general. And
I really appreciate you explaining this to me.
I'm not explaining this to you. I'm explaining this. I'm looking at the camera for all the listeners. There's almost millions of people here in this chat.
Of course, there are.
And they're
teaming with people. I'm just like,
I'm almost mansplaining, right?
A little bit. Almost, not quite. Yes, you're totally mansplaining.
Well, let me explain to you like this then, in a way you would understand, Kim.
Oh, thank you. But that's the thing though, is like there's a segment of people, men on the internet, that yes, Dylan explaining, that definitely do that, and they do that with every show, not just with the wife character, but they'll do that like anytime there's a main female character. I mean, just the review bombing that happened with She-Hulk most recently. Those kinds of things obviously do happen. But
Brie
what I'm
Larson
saying
with Captain Marvel, like that was
she's still dealing with that shit.
That was crazy. It's still crazy.
Yeah.
But nobody cares that the Queen of England was just now recast with a man. Nobody complained about that.
I hear a lot of people complaining about that, actually, but
okay.
not for that reason. Oh my gosh, sorry, random side note, but there is a video going around that is King Charles, so weird to say, showing up, I think, to one part of the funeral, and they've got like the people walking in front of him, and it's all set to the Imperial March, and it's timed so perfectly, it's hilarious. Anyway, random side note. But the thing about Skylar, thank you, I do think that the way that because this is our introduction to her, the way that she's presented in season 1, I see some people with legitimate complaints about that. It's too bad that in some cases they couldn't look past that first season and the way she's first introduced and look at the totality of her relationship with Walt and understanding that there were reasons that she had to be this way sometimes. But I think that I'm just really glad. Sorry, I'm not going to talk specifics, but going into future seasons, I'm really glad that we do get to see other facets of Skylar. We do get to see other views of her, so that this version of her, these first few episodes, are not the only Skylar that we get to know.
I agree. Yeah, I think there's some elements to, like, obviously it's well documented that I didn't like The Last Jedi. And when it first came out, we recorded a podcast and I just went through the list of things I didn't like about it. And then, over the coming weeks, it became pretty clear that the loud voices that were attacking Last Jedi had different motivations than their thoughts on a fucking movie that's about space wizards for children. And that's when eventually I was like, well, geez Louise, like I'm not teaming up with this. This is not about the movie at all anymore. So I think, there's probably some elements to that where there were some people that had you're saying had some legitimate complaints about some situations with Skylar, but then they just got kind of avalanched by this group of people that had completely different motivations for why they were discussing what they were discussing.
Right.
One thing you said earlier also that we kind of brushed past, and I definitely want to make sure we talk about it too before we wrap it up, is when Walt breaks bad. Because it's not in this first season. It's not in any specific season. It's not in any specific moment. Just like we just went through with Better Call Saul. We're so obsessed with this one moment where he switches on and becomes Darth Vader, like fucking happens in Revenge of the Sith, the Star Wars movie. And it's fucking corny. Somebody doesn't just become something with the flip switched. It's something that happens over a period of time. Now, that period of time could be short, could be long, but it's a gradual thing in some way, shape, or form. I don't think any of them have one event that makes them become who they become. I do think there's something to, and we'll talk about it in future seasons, but it's like Walter White pretending to be Heisenberg. Heisenberg being Heisenberg pretending to be Walter White, that they show throughout the seasons. But I don't think there's this single event that happens and now he's Heisenberg.
I hear you, and I agree that it's not one single event that changes him, but I do think for him and for Saul, there is a tipping point. There's such a buildup, but there becomes a point for both of them where it becomes the point of no return. Like, once a certain thing happens, that's it. They're not going back to who they were. This is fully who they are now. But before that thing happens, they could still turn it around. They can still make a different choice. And I do think there's a specific time for Walt, and we will talk about it when we get to that season.
But that's different than what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think I agree with you that it's not a big, like, okay, this is the event, this is the moment, but I do think there is a tipping point. And I do think there's a choice that's made that brings us over that tipping point, but I don't think just, blowing up Tuco's building or other things that happen. I don't think that's right, or killing Crazy 8. I don't think that is like, okay, he's bad now. He was good, but now he's bad. It's not that at all.
I think
totally agree.
They both follow a formula of 3 feet forward, 1 foot back, 3 foot forward, 1 foot back. And I think it's kind of like a heartbeat in that way, where it follows a pattern of this. Then we corrects itself a little bit, just like a free market does. And then it goes 3 feet forward and then it slides back just a little bit. And then it thrusts forward past that point. And, I think Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul both kind of do that. Yeah. But
I do think it happens sooner for Walt than it does for Jimmy, Saul, Gene.
I think Jimmy's lines are a little more blurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then lastly, also, when he kills Crazy 8, it's such amazing realism. I've never seen somebody choke to death with a bike lock, but it really feels real. His eyes don't like bulge like Luca Brasi, but they like become bloodshot. Like the blood vessels pop in his eye. I think the actor does a phenomenal job of seeming stiff and just flailing his arms back to try to stab the plate in him. And bravo, Vince.
There's a level of realism in Breaking Bad that starts with the first episode of season 1 and continues all the way through that really does, just to the point that you were making earlier, I think it really does help solidify Breaking Bad as not just one of the best shows on TV, but and groundbreaking isn't the right word, but just kind of one of the shows that you can look to as like, this is when TV changed.
Well said.
Thank you.
Karen Peterson.
Yeah.
Sam, I'm just a person listening to this podcast. I don't know much about you. I want to get to know you better. How would I do that? Would I slide into your DMs or would I listen to a podcast that you do?
You can listen to all the podcasts that I do. You can also find me on social medias. I don't
slide into her DMs. Don't do
I don't really respond to those. No, but I do respond to polite tweets. So, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd at Karen M. Peterson. And I try to link my work. I'm not always great at that, but I definitely link the Watch and Talk, because I do that every week with
Tell me about that podcast.
That is such a great show. Derek Miranda and I started it about a year and a half ago.
You guys are pioneers.
We are.
And then what's the other podcast you do?
What's that?
What's the other podcast you do?
It is called Citizen Dame. And that is where my co-host and I talk about the film and TV world from a very feminist point of view.
I was invited to be a co-host on the show, was denied. That doesn't make sense. I was invited and it was denied.
You invited yourself?
Yeah, I invited myself.
We've never had a male guest on the show.
That is completely sexist, and I will be writing a complaint.
I have not said that we won't. I just am saying we haven't.
Fair enough. And for me, you can follow me at the Dylan Schuck. That's TheDylenSchuck. If you're interested in joining the stream, we're probably going to be doing the third Wednesday of every month until the show's over. But follow us at BetterTalkSaul on Twitter. You'll get the information. If you subscribe, you can turn on notifications. It will notify you when we're going live. Love to have people. Godzilla in the chat. New pod, Citizen Dylan. I'm gonna just sit there. I use your guys' logo and everything like that, and it's just my face on it. Anyway, but we're gonna be doing this once a month, so we can have some time to watch it. Dan isn't rewatching it, so he didn't join this week. I'll convince him to join on some of them, but tell
him I said pretty please.
Yeah, everybody tweet at Dan the Beast saying pretty please join the Breaking Bad podcast. Everybody stop what you're doing right now. Go on Twitter at Dan the Beast. Pretty please come on the Breaking Bad podcast. We miss you. We love you. We hate Dylan and we like Karen. Okay? You can fit that all in 160 characters. 320 characters now?
280.
280 characters. All right. For the show, you follow us at BetterTalkSaul. Email us at BetterTalkSaul@gmail.com. And that's it. I'm Dylan Schuck.
I'm Karen Peterson.
And we'll see you next month.